A terrible vengeance. Conclusion. He'd have seen me write it. It was August once again. August, fine, warm, and sunshiny. Just 1 year after that damp afternoon, on which Paul Murray and his friends stood in front of the ship at Lower Hillford. No lack of visitors that season. Hotels were full, and furnished houses at a premium. The hearts of lodging housekeepers were glad. Ladies arrayed in rainbow hues flashed about the quiet village streets. Boatmen reaped a golden harvest. All sorts of crafts swarmed on the river. Men in flannels gallantly towered, their feminine belongings up against the languidly flowing stream. Pater and mater familias, and all the olive branches, big and little, were to be met on the Thames, and on the banks of the Thames, from Richmond to Staines, and even higher still. The lilies growing around Docket Point floated, with their pure cups wide open to the sun. No close folding of the white wax leaves around the golden centre that season. Besides, the water-purple loosestrife grew in great clumps, of brilliant colour, dazzling to the sight. It was, in fact, a glorious August, in which pleasure-seekers could idle and sun themselves, and get tanned to an almost perfect brown, without the slightest of trouble. During the past 12-month local, tradition had tried hard to add another ghost at Drumsey Deep to the already established in the adjoining Stabbury. But the unshrinking brightness of that glorious summer checked belief in it for the time. No doubt when the dull autumn days came, and the long winter nights, full of awful possibilities, folded water and land and fog and darkness, a figure dressed in grey silk and black velvet fichu, with a natty grey hat trimmed with black and white feathers on its phantom head, and small feet covered by the thinnest of open-work stockings, from which the shoes, so much too large, had dropped long ago, would reappear once more, to the terror of all who heard. But for the time being, snugly tucked up in holy ground, the girl whose heart had rejoiced in her beauty, her youth, and her admirers, and her finery was lying quiet, still, and quiet, with closed eyes, and ears that heard neither the church bells, nor the splash of oars, nor the murmur of the human voices. Others, too, were missing from, though not missed by, Shepperton. The Thames village misses no human being, so long as the others, with plenty of money, come down by rail, boat, or carriage to supply. Paul Murray, Dick Saville, and Walter Grantley were all absent. Miss Heath, too, had gone, a tottering, heartbroken woman, to Mr. Poynter's, where she was most miserable, but where she and her small processions were taken remarkably good care of. "Only a year agone," she said one day, "my girl was with me. In the morning she wore her pretty cambric with pink spots, and in the afternoon that grey silk in which she was buried, for we durst not change a thread, but just wrapped a winding sheet round what was left. Oh, Lucy, 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 to think I bore you for this." And then she wept softly, and nobody heeded or tried to console her, for what was Mrs. Poynter, Wiser said, was the use of fretting over a daughter dead a 12-month, and never much of a comfort either. Mr. Richard Saville was still grinding away, to quote his expression. Walter Gramley had departed to report his friends for the Diamond Fields. His enemies improved on this by carelessly answering, "Grantley? Oh, he's gone to the devil," which latter statement could not have been quite true, since he was been back in England for a long time, and is now quite well to do and reconciled to his family. As for Paul Murray, there had been all sorts of rumours floating about concerning him. The honeymoon had been unduly protracted. From place to place the married pair had wandered, never quite resting, never quite staying. Alas, for him there was no rest. There could be none. It mattered not where he went, whether he went east, west, south, or north, for those noiseless wet feet followed. No train was swift enough to outstrip them. No boat could cut the water fast enough to leave them behind. They tracked him with a dogged persistence. They were with him while he was sleeping, walking, eating, drinking, and praying. For Paul Murray in those days often prayed, after a desperate heathenish fashion. And yet the plague was not stayed. The accursed thing still dogged him like a fate. After a while, people began to shy from him, because the footsteps were no more intermittent. They were always where he was. He entered a cathedral, they accompanied him. He walked solitary through the woods, or paced the lakeside, or wandered by the sea. They were ever and always with the man. They were worse than evil conscience, because conscience sleeps, and they from the day of his marriage never did. They waited for that, waited till he would raise the cup of happiness to his lips, in order to fill it with gall, waited till his wife's dream of bliss was perfect, and then woke her to the knowledge of some horror more agonizing than death. There were times when he left his young wife for days and days, and went like those possessed of old into the wilderness, seeking rest and finding none, for no legion of demons could have cursed a man's life more than those wet feet, which printed marks on Paul Murray's heart that might have been branded by red-hot irons. All that had gone before was as nothing to the trouble of having involved another in the horrible mystery of his own life, and that other, a gentle, innocent, loving creature, he might just as well have killed as married. He did not know what to do. His brain was always on fire. He had lost all hope and hold upon himself, a grip over his mind. On the sea of life he tossed like a ship without a rudder, 1 minute taking a resolve to shoot himself, the next turning his steps to seek a priest, and confess the whole matter fully and freely, and before he had walked a dozen yards, determining to go away into some savage and desolate land, where those horrible feet might, if they pleased, follow him to his grave. By degrees, this was the plan which took firm root in his dazed brain, and accordingly one morning he started for England, leaving a note in which he asked his wife to follow him. He never meant to see her sweet face again, and he never did. He was determined to go to his father-in-law and confess to him, and accordingly, on the anniversary of Lucy's death, he found himself at Losdale Court, where vague rumours of some unaccountable trouble had preceded him. Mr. Kedrick was brooding over these rumours in his library when, as if in answer to his thoughts, the servant announced Mr. Murray. "Good God!" exclaimed the older man, shocked by the white, haggard face before him. "What is wrong?" "I have been ill," was the reply. "Where is your wife?" "She is following. She will be here in a day or so." "Why did you not travel together?" "Oh, that is what I've come to tell you." Then he stopped and put his hand to his heart. He had voluntarily come up for execution, and now his courage was failing him. His manhood was gone, and his nerves unstrung. He was but a poor, weak, and wasted creature, worn out by the ceaseless torment of those haunting feet, which, however, since he turned his steps to England, did not follow him. Why had he travelled to Losdale Court? Might he not have crossed the ocean, and effaced himself in the far west, without telling a story at all? Just as he had laid down the revolver, and just as he had turned from the priest, he now felt he could not say that which he had been determined to say. "I've walked too far," he said after a pause. "I cannot talk just yet." "Will you leave me for half an hour?" No, I don't want anything, thank you, except to be in the quiet. Quiet. Ah, heavens. After a little he rose and passed out onto the terrace. Around there was a beauty and peace and sunshine, and he was the only jarring element. And even on him there seemed a failing, a numbered sensation, which for the time being simulated rest. He left the terrace and crossed the lawn till he came to a great and large cedar tree, under which there was a seat, which he could sit such a short time before leaving the court. Yes, he would go away and make no sign. Dreamily he thought of the wild, lone lands beyond the sea, where there would be none to ask whence he came, or marvel about the curse which followed him. Over the boundless prairie and up the mountain heights, let those feet pursue him if they would. Away from his fellows he could bear this burden. He would confess to no one, only to God. He knew his sin and sorrow, only to his Maker, who might have pity on the work of his hands, and some day bid that relentless avenger be still. No, he would take no man into his confidence, and even as he so decided, the brightness of the day seemed to cloud over. Warmth was exchanged for deadly chill. A horror of darkness seemed thrown like a pall over him, and a rushing sound as of many waters filled his ears. An hour later, when Mr. Kedrick sought his son-in-law, he found him lying on the ground, wet and trampled, as though by hundreds of little tiny feet. His shouts brought help, and Paul Murray was carried into the house, where they laid him on a couch and piled rugs and blankets over his shivering, chill body. "Fetch a doctor at once," said Mr. Ketterick. "And a clergyman," added the housekeeper. "No, a magistrate." "No, a magistrate," cried the sick man in a loud voice. They had thought him insensible and startled. They all looked at each other. After that he spoke no more, but turned his head away from them and lay quiet. The doctor was the first to arrive. After such quick alertness, he stepped across the room, pulled aside the coverings, and took the patient's hand. After gently moving the averted face, he said quite solemnly, like a man whose occupation is gone, "I can do nothing for him. He is quite dead." It was true. Whatever his secret, Paul Murray carried with him to a country much farther distant than the lone land where he had thought to hide his misery. "It's of no use talking to me," said Mr. Davis, when subsequently telling his story. "If Mr. Murray had been a gentleman as was a gentleman, he'd have seen me righted, dead or not. She was able to come back at least. At least her feet were. And he could have done the same if he'd liked. It was as bad as swindling, not making a fresh will after he was married. How was I to know that will would turn out so much waste paper? And then when I asked for my own, Miss Murray dismissed me without even a character, and Mr. Ketterick's lawyers won't give me anything either. So a lot I've made up being a faithful servant, and I'd have all servants take warning by me." Mr. Davis is his own servant now, and he finds himself a very bad master.